The temperature outside Dirksen Federal Building read 38 degrees that morning. Inside the federal courthouse hummed with the particular silence of a place where lives are decided: polished marble floors, fluorescent lights that never flickered, and the measured footsteps of lawyers who had done this 1,000 times before. Nobody noticed the little girl at first. She was small, even for 7, a navy dress, 2 braids tied with white ribbon, a backpack that seemed almost too large for her frame. She walked like she knew exactly where she was going. In her arms, she carried a stack of papers, nearly as tall as her chest. The security officer stepped forward. "Little girl, you cannot go in there. That's an active federal courtroom." She stopped, looked up at him, not with fear, not with hesitation, with something that made him pause. "I know," she said quietly. "My daddy is in there, and I found the lie." The courtroom door swung open. 40 heads turned. Nobody laughed, because something in her eyes told every single person in that room this child was not playing. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your city right now. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if nobody has told you today, you're exactly where you need to be. Now hit subscribe, because this story is just getting started. The alarm went off at 5:47 a.m. in the Jackson apartment on Southside Chicago, and Denise was already awake. She had not slept, not really. She had lain in the dark with her eyes open, listening to the radiator knock and the wind push against the window, counting the hours the way she had counted them for 14 months, one at a time, because looking at the whole number was too much to carry. 8 to 12 years. That was what the prosecutor had asked for. 8 to 12 years for a man who had never owned a gun, never missed a child support payment, never been late to a single shift in 9 years of work. She got up before the alarm finished its second ring. Moved through the dark kitchen by memory. The coffee maker was third cabinet on the left. The mugs were above the sink. The sugar was the small blue bowl Marcus had bought at a flea market the summer Amara was born. She did not turn the light on. The light felt like too much. By 6:10, she was in her uniform. The navy blue shirt with the building services logo on the left chest, the black pants with the crease she ironed in every Sunday night. She had her hair pulled back tight. She looked the same as she did every morning. Nobody at the Dirksen Federal Building would know that today was the day her husband was going to be sentenced to nearly a decade in prison for something he did not do. That was the thing about being invisible. You got very good at it. She was pouring coffee into her thermos when Amara appeared in the doorway. The little girl was already dressed. Navy dress, the good one, with the white collar, white ribbon ties on both braids, her good shoes with the buckle instead of the Velcro. Her purple backpack was already on her shoulders. Denise stared at her. "Baby, I didn't even wake you up yet." "I know," Amara sat down at the kitchen table. "I set my own alarm." Wait, when did you learn to do that?" "When Daddy got arrested." She said it the way a 7-year-old says things, without armor, without softening, just the plain fact of it. I didn't want to miss anything anymore. Denise set the thermos down, looked at her daughter, this small, serious person who had decided somewhere in the past 14 months to stop being a child about certain things. The weight of that hit her somewhere she did not have words for. "Your school called last night," Denise said finally. "Snow emergency. They're closed today." "I know. That's why I packed my bag." Denise had known this was coming. She had no one to leave Amara with. Her mother was in Memphis, her sister worked the early shift at the hospital, and the neighbors downstairs had their own problems. So Amara was coming to the courthouse, to the building where her father's fate would be decided. And there was nothing Denise could do about that except try to keep her daughter far enough away that she would not have to watch. "You're going to stay in the break room on the 4th floor," Denise said. "You're going to read your book, you're going to be quiet, and you are not going to talk to anyone. You understand me?" Amara looked up at her, those eyes dark and steady and too old. "Yes, Mama." A pause. "But what if I see something wrong?" Denise felt the question land somewhere in her chest. She thought about the 14 months. The phone calls from the jail, crackling and brief. The court dates that came and went without anything changing. The way Marcus had looked at her through the plexiglass the last time she visited, like a man who had stopped expecting good things to happen. She thought about Craig Whitfield, the court-appointed defense attorney, who had shown up to every hearing in a different expensive suit, carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than Denise made in a month, and had produced exactly nothing that mattered. No witnesses, no expert testimony, no challenges to the evidence that felt to Denise, who had no law degree, who had cleaned courtroom floors for 11 years, like it had holes in it. She thought about all the things she had wanted to say and had not said because saying them would not have helped. Because she was a black woman in a cleaning uniform, and the lawyers and the bailiffs and the clerks looked through her like she was part of the furniture. "Baby," she said quietly, "we cannot afford wrong right now. You hear me?" Amara did not answer. She just reached into her backpack and pushed the book down deeper. The big red covered one that she had carried for the past 3 months, the one Denise had finally looked at the spine of 2 weeks ago. Black's Law Dictionary. Her 7-year-old daughter was carrying a law dictionary to school. Denise had not said anything about it. She did not know what to say. They took the 6:38 bus downtown. Amara sat beside her with the backpack on her lap, looking out the window at the gray Chicago morning, the streets still salted from the last snow, the sky the color of old concrete, the storefronts just beginning to turn their lights on. She did not fidget. She did not ask questions. She just watched. Denise thought she is too young to be this quiet. They arrived at the Dirksen Federal Building at 7:32 a.m. The building rose 27 floors above Dearborn Street, all steel and glass, the kind of architecture that was designed to make you feel small before you even walked in. The security line was already long. Denise badged through the employee entrance and signed Amara in as a visitor. In the lobby, they passed the legal team from the prosecution, 3 attorneys in matching dark suits laughing about something, coffee cups in hand, comfortable the way people are comfortable when they are certain of the outcome. They passed Craig Whitfield near the elevator bank. He was on his phone, one hand in his pocket, Louis Vuitton briefcase hanging from his wrist. He was a Northwestern law graduate, the kind of man whose name appeared on lists. He glanced at Denise and Amara the way he had glanced at them at every court date, a brief nod, professional practice already looking past them. "Mr. Whitfield," Denise stopped. "Is there anything new? Anything we should know before—" "Mrs. Jackson." He lowered the phone slightly. "We've been through the strategy. There's nothing to add at this stage. Just stay calm and let me handle the courtroom." He went back to his phone. Denise stood there for a moment. Then she took Amara's hand and walked toward the elevator. Behind her, she heard one of Whitfield's colleagues say something. Heard Whitfield laugh, low, easy, the laugh of a man with no particular concerns about the morning ahead. From the other elevator bank, 2 of Denise's colleagues from the building services team were waiting, Rosa and Darnell, who had worked the federal building longer than anyone. Rosa touched Denise's arm. "How you holding up?" "I'm standing," Denise said, which was the most honest thing she could say. Darnell shook his head slowly. "That lawyer of his, man, I've watched him in court before. He don't fight for nobody. He just goes through the motions." "Darnell," Rosa started. "I'm just saying what everybody already knows." Denise did not respond. She pressed the elevator button for the 4th floor and watched the numbers descend. What she did not know, what none of them knew, was that 14 months of fear and 14 months of reading and 14 months of refusing to stop believing her father had brought Amara Jackson to this building on this morning for a reason. And somewhere on the 4th floor, a cart full of documents sat unattended in a hallway. What Amara didn't know yet was that the file cart left unattended in that hallway was about to hand her the one thing no lawyer in that building had bothered to find. The 4th floor break room smelled like burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. It was a small room, 2 round tables, 6 plastic chairs, a microwave with a cracked handle, a vending machine that hummed too loud. The window looked out over the building's east side, where a narrow strip of gray sky sat above the rooftops of the loop. Amara could see snow on the window ledge. The temperature had not moved past 38 degrees all morning. She sat at the table closest to the door and unzipped her backpack. The red-covered dictionary came out first, then To Kill a Mockingbird. The old paperback with the bent spine, the one her father had read to her when she was 4 and sick with fever, doing all the voices, making Atticus Finch sound like a man who believed what he was saying. She had read it herself 3 times since then. She knew whole pages by memory. She opened the dictionary to a page she had marked with a folded corner. Hearsay, admissibility, chain of custody. She had been learning these words for 6 months, not because anyone told her to, because the words existed, and her father was in a building full of people who used them, and she had decided that not knowing them was not something she was willing to accept. At 9 a.m., she heard the courtroom down the hall begin to fill. The low murmur of voices, the shuffling of chairs, the sound of a door being pulled firmly shut. Her father was in that room. She turned a page of the dictionary and tried to read. At 9:12, a courthouse clerk came down the hall pushing a metal file cart, the kind with two shelves and rubber wheels that squeaked on the marble floor. The clerk stopped outside the break room door, leaned the cart against the wall, and walked back toward the elevator with her phone out. Amara looked at the cart. On the top shelf, there was a thick manila folder with a white label, black typed letters. She could read them from where she sat. State versus Marcus D. Jackson. Case number 23, CR 4417, sentencing exhibits. She sat very still. This was not her file to touch. She knew that. She was 7 years old and she was sitting in a break room because her mother had told her to stay there and be quiet and not cause trouble. She looked at the folder for a long time. Then she got up and walked into the hallway. The clerk was gone. The hallway was empty except for the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Amara stood beside the cart and looked at the folder. She thought, this is Daddy's case. These are his papers. She picked up the folder and carried it back to the table. She opened it. The first section was labeled Prosecution Exhibits, photographs of the Holloway Electric loading dock property inventory sheets. The security footage, still images printed on glossy paper. She turned past them carefully, not bending anything, keeping every page in order. The second section was labeled Witness Testimony Transcripts. She read the first page, slowly moving her finger under each line, the way her teacher had taught her in first grade, even though she had stopped needing to do that by the time she was 5. The key witness, a security supervisor named Dale Pruitt, had given a statement on March 21st. She read his words, I observed Marcus Jackson at the loading dock entrance at approximately 11:15 p.m. on the evening of March 14th. She flipped to the prosecution's summary of the security footage. The footage recorded by Camera 4 on the East Loading Dock shows an individual matching the description of Marcus D. Jackson entering the loading dock area at 11:47 p.m. on March 14th. Amara stopped. She read both sentences again, then a third time. Dale Pruitt said he saw Marcus at 11:15 p.m. The camera showed someone arriving at 11:47 p.m. That was 32 minutes apart. She sat very still and thought about that. If the witness saw Marcus at 11:15 and the camera caught someone at 11:47, one of two things was true. Either the witness was wrong about the time, or the camera was wrong about the time. Either way, they could not both be right, and nobody in the courtroom had said a single word about it. She kept reading. Third section, Defense Exhibits. This section was thinner than the others, significantly thinner. She turned through it slowly. Character references, Marcus's employment record, a letter from his union rep. And then near the back, paper clipped to a page with a handwritten note that said, received November 14th, not introduced to receipt. She unfolded it. It was from Rush University Medical Center, Emergency Department. Patient Elijah Marcus Jackson. Date of service, March 14th. Time of admission, 10:47 p.m. Attending physician note child presented with fever of 103.8 treated and released 1:22 a.m. Parent/guardian signature, Marcus D. Jackson. Amara looked at the timestamp on the loading dock signature sheet. March 14th. Log time 11:15 p.m. At 11:15 p.m. on March 14th, Marcus Jackson had been sitting in a hospital emergency room with his sick son. The receipt was in the file. It had been there the entire time, and Craig Whitfield had never shown it to the court. She set the paper down very carefully. Her hands were steady. She did not know why her hands were steady, because the rest of her was not. She went back to the prosecution exhibits, found the technical report for the security footage, 2 pages dense with technical language stapled together. She read it slowly. Some of the words she did not know. She skipped those and read around them the way you read around a rock in a stream. File name doc _cam4 _0314 _2347.mp4. File creation date March 16, 3:22 a.m. She read that line 4 times. The file had been created on March 16th. The event it supposedly recorded happened on March 14th. She knew enough from the dictionary from reading from 6 months of trying to understand what had happened to her father to know that a video file could not record something before it existed. A recording was made when something happened. The file was created at the moment of recording. That was how it worked, unless someone had made a new file afterward and put old information into it. Did I read that right, she thought. Let me read it again. She read it again. File creation date March 16th, 3:22 a.m. She read it a third time. Her heart was beating very fast now. Not the fast of running or playing, but the fast of standing at the edge of something enormous and looking down. The video was fake. The hospital receipt proved her father was somewhere else. The witness time and the camera time did not match. And the lawyer had never said any of it. She sat at that table for 3 minutes without moving. The vending machine hummed. Somewhere down the hall, a door opened and closed. The strip of gray sky outside the window had not changed. She pulled a napkin from the dispenser on the table, found a pencil in her backpack, and began to write small, careful letters because the napkin was not large and she had a lot to say. File made March 16th, event March 14th. 2 days wrong. Hospital bill Elijah, 10:47 p.m., March 14th. Daddy signed it, never shown to court. Witness 11:15, camera 11:47. 32 minutes different. She looked at what she had written. The metadata didn't lie, but someone had. And that someone was sitting 10 feet away from her father right now pretending to save him. She sat with the napkin in front of her for a long time. The break room clock on the wall read 9:38 a.m. Somewhere below her through the floors and the marble and the fluorescent hum, her father was sitting at a table in a courtroom, waiting to hear how many years of his life were going to be taken from him. The sentencing was scheduled to begin at 10 o'clock. That gave her 22 minutes. She looked at what she had written on the napkin. Then she looked at the folder. Then she looked at the window where the gray sky had not changed and the snow on the ledge had not moved, and the city outside kept going the way cities do. Indifferent, continuous, unconcerned with the small disasters happening inside the buildings it surrounded. Nobody will believe a 7-year-old. The thought came in clean and clear the way cold water feels sharp enough to make her catch her breath. Nobody will believe the cleaning lady's daughter. She had heard that phrase her whole life, not always in those exact words, but always in that shape. The way the other kids' parents looked at her at school pickup, the way store clerks followed her mother through certain aisles, the way Craig Whitfield had looked past them in the elevator lobby that morning, already onto the next thing, already certain that nothing coming from their direction required his full attention. A 7-year-old girl with a napkin and a pencil standing up in a federal courtroom against a Northwestern law graduate with 22 years of experience and a Louis Vuitton briefcase. She thought about what would happen. They would look at her. Some of them would smile the way adults smile at children who say something they find accidentally funny. Someone, probably Whitfield, would ask security to remove her. Her mother would be pulled in from the hallway. Denise would lose her job, maybe worse, and her father would still go to prison for 8 to 12 years. Elijah would grow up without him. She would grow up without him. Her mother would keep waking up at 5:47 in the dark and ironing the crease into her pants and going to work in that building and looking at the courtroom floors she cleaned and knowing that the floors had not helped him. The clock read 9:41. She folded the napkin into a small square and pressed it flat with her palm. And then from somewhere she could not have pointed to on a map, from somewhere between her ribs and the back of her throat, she heard her mother's voice. Not the voice from this morning, tight with worry and warning. The other voice. The one from bedtime, from Sunday mornings, from the quiet moments when Denise thought no one was particularly listening. The truth doesn't need a fancy degree to stand up in court, baby. It just needs someone brave enough to say it out loud. Amara sat with that for a moment. She thought Mama said that about the news about a woman who had testified against her employer and won. She had not said it to Amara specifically. She had been talking to the television, but Amara had been listening. She was always listening. She unfolded the napkin and looked at it again. File made March 16th, event March 14th, 2 days wrong, hospital bill Elijah, 10:47 p.m. March 14th, Daddy signed it, never shown to court, witness 11:15, camera 11:47, 32 minutes different. Three things. Three things that were true and provable and sitting in a folder that had been wheeled down a hallway and left unattended because no one had thought it mattered, because no one had thought anyone in the break room on the 4th floor was going to read it. She put the napkin in the front pocket of her backpack. She was standing up, backpack on her shoulders, when she heard the squeak of her mother's cart coming down the hallway. Denise appeared in the doorway. She was moving fast the way she moved when she was behind schedule, quick steps, a slight lean forward, already thinking about the next thing. She saw Amara standing and frowned. "Why are you standing? You need to sit back." She stopped. Her eyes went to the open manila folder on the table. then to Amara's face, then back to the folder. Amara, what is that? It was on the cart in the hallway. It's Daddy's case file. Baby? Denise's voice dropped. She stepped into the room and pushed the door mostly closed behind her. You cannot touch court documents. Do you understand how much trouble? Mama? Amara's voice was quiet, not defiant, just certain. I need you to listen to me. Something in the way she said it made Denise stop. The video they used against Daddy Amara said, the file was created on March 16th. The thing it was supposed to record happened on March 14th. A file can't exist before the thing it recorded. That means someone made it later. Someone faked it. Denise stared at her. And there's a hospital receipt in the defense folder. From Rush University, March 14th, 10:47 p.m. Daddy took Elijah to the emergency room. He was there until after 1 in the morning. His signature is on the receipt. Mr. Whitfield never showed it to the court. It says right on it, not introduced. The room was very quiet. And the witness said he saw Daddy at 11:15. But the camera shows someone at 11:47. That's 32 minutes apart. They can't both be right. Denise had not moved. She was looking at her daughter the way you look at something you cannot quite reconcile with the world as you know it, like a word in a sentence that shouldn't be there, but somehow makes the sentence more true. Baby, she said finally. Her voice was different now, slower. How do you know all of that? I read it, Mama, all of it. Amara held up the napkin. I wrote it down. 3 seconds passed. Long enough for the vending machine to cycle through one of its hums. Long enough for Denise to read the napkin once, then read it again, her lips moving slightly the way they did when she was reading something she needed to be sure of. Long enough for something to shift behind Denise's eyes. She looked up from the napkin. She looked at her daughter. She looked at the clock. 9:49 a.m. 11 minutes. She looked back at Amara. At this child, this 7-year-old child who had packed her backpack the night before and set her own alarm and carried a law dictionary to school and sat in a break room on the 4th floor of a federal courthouse and read her father's case file with more care and more attention than the man being paid $180 an hour to defend him. Denise pulled the cart back into the hallway and set the folder exactly where it had been. Then she came back inside, took off her cleaning apron, folded it once, and set it on the table. Show me which page it was, she said. Amara showed her, everyone. 2 minutes passed. Denise read without speaking. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes moved carefully. She pressed one finger against the file creation date on the technical report and held it there for a moment. Then she straightened up, all the way up, the way Amara had only seen her stand a few times at Marcus's trial when she had refused to cry, at Elijah's baptism when she had worn her good dress and held her head like it was something worth holding. Come with me, Denise said. The courtroom door was heavy, too heavy for a 7-year-old, but Amara pushed it open anyway. The security officer outside courtroom 4B was a large man named Gerald, and he had worked the federal building for 19 years without a single incident he could not handle. He stepped forward the moment he saw them coming, a woman in a building services uniform moving fast, and a small girl in a navy dress keeping pace beside her. Ma'am, court is in session. You cannot. That is my husband in there. Denise did not slow down. And my daughter has evidence that was never presented to this court. Ma'am, I understand, but the rules are… Gerald. Denise looked at him directly. She had cleaned this hallway for 11 years. She knew his name. She knew he took his lunch at 12:15 and kept a photograph of his granddaughter taped inside his station locker. Please. Something in her face made him step aside. The courtroom door opened. The room was larger than Amara had imagined, even though she had thought about it many times. Dark wood paneling, high ceilings, fluorescent lights that were slightly warmer than the ones in the hallway, which made everything look a little more serious, a little more permanent. 3 rows of gallery benches half full. The prosecution table on the right, 3 attorneys organized at ease. The defense table on the left, Craig Whitfield with his legal pad, his pen, his practiced expression of professional concern. And at the defense table beside Whitfield, wearing the gray shirt they had sent him for court appearances, Marcus. He turned when the door opened. When he saw Denise and Amara, something moved across his face that Amara did not have a word for yet. She was 7, and there were still some expressions that belonged to a vocabulary she had not learned. At the bench, the Honorable Patricia Okafor looked up from her papers. She was 53 years old with close-cropped gray hair and reading glasses pushed down her nose, and the bearing of someone who had been asked to be patient with foolishness for a very long time and had mostly succeeded. She had been on the federal bench for 19 years. Before that, she had been a public defender. Before that, she had grown up in Englewood, 4 miles from where the Jacksons lived now. She looked at the woman in the cleaning uniform. She looked at the child in the navy dress standing very straight in the middle of a federal courtroom, holding a backpack and a folded napkin. And for just a moment, 1 second, maybe less, she was 8 years old again. Standing in a hallway very much like this one, outside a room, very much like this one, while her father sat inside and the adults around her spoke in measured voices about things she was too young to understand. Nobody had listened to her then either. She removed her reading glasses. Ooh, what is the meaning of this interruption? Whitfield was already on his feet. Your Honor, I apologize. I have no idea how these individuals gained access to the... Mr. Whitfield. Judge Okafor's voice was not loud. It did not need to be. I did not ask you. She looked at Amara. Young lady, you are in a federal courtroom. This is not a place where people come without a reason. Do you have a reason? Amara's heart was beating so fast she could feel it in her fingertips. She thought about the break room, the napkin, the file creation date, her father's signature on the hospital receipt. All the mornings her mother had gotten up before the alarm and ironed the crease into her pants and gone to work in this building without anyone looking at her. Yes, ma'am, Amara said. Her voice was small, but it was steady. The security footage used to convict my daddy was created 2 days after the date it was supposed to record. And the hospital receipt that proves he was somewhere else that night, his lawyer never showed it to you. The courtroom was very quiet. The prosecutor, a man named Holloway, had hired indirectly, though no one in this room knew that yet, shifted in his chair. Someone in the gallery coughed. Whitfield's pen was very still on his legal pad. Your Honor, Whitfield said. His voice had changed, just slightly, a half step higher, a fraction faster. This is highly irregular. A child cannot possibly understand digital forensics or the rules of evidence. Whatever she thinks she found, Counselor, Judge Okafor held up one hand. I said sit down. She looked at Amara again. Show me what you have. Amara unzipped the front pocket of her backpack and took out the napkin. She walked it to the bench 12 steps across a courtroom that felt like 12 miles and held it up. Judge Okafor read it. She read it again. Then she looked at the prosecution table. Is the technical report for the security footage in the exhibit record? Yes, Your Honor, the lead prosecutor said carefully. I want your IT specialist in this courtroom in the next 15 minutes. And I want the original exhibit file loaded on the court system. She set the napkin down on her bench and looked at Whitfield. Counselor, the hospital receipt referenced on this child's note. Why was it not introduced in your defense presentation? Whitfield opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. There were strategic considerations, Your Honor. The decision was made to focus on, was the receipt in your possession? A pause, long enough to mean everything. Yes, Your Honor, and you chose not to introduce it. It was not a question. Whitfield said nothing. His hands resting on the legal pad were very still. The kind of still that is not calm, but is the thing just before calm breaks entirely. At the defense table, Marcus Jackson had turned in his chair and was looking at his daughter. He had not spoken. He had barely moved. He was looking at Amara the way people look at something they cannot explain, something that does not fit into the category of things they thought the world contained. The IT specialist arrived in 14 minutes. She was a young woman named Claire, one of the courthouse's technical staff, carrying a laptop and a portable drive. She sat at the table set up beside the clerk's station and pulled up the exhibit file while the room waited in the particular silence of people who understand that something important is about to be confirmed or denied. It took her 6 minutes. She looked up from the screen. She looked at the judge. She looked at Whitfield. She looked at the napkin on the bench. Then she said 4 words that made the entire courtroom go cold. The footage has been altered. The gallery erupted. The gavel came down twice, 3 times. Someone at the prosecution table said something to a colleague in a voice they thought was low enough. Whitfield sat back in his chair as if a string holding him upright had been quietly cut. At the defense table, Marcus Jackson pressed both hands over his face. His shoulders began to shake. The hallway outside courtroom 4B was empty when Amara walked out. Judge Okafor had called a recess 1 hour, she had said in a voice that left no room for negotiation. The FBI field office was being contacted. The Illinois Attorney General's office was being contacted. The technical report was being sent to an independent forensics lab for verification, though Claire's findings had left very little to verify. Denise had followed Amara into the hallway. She had not said anything. She had watched her daughter walk to the far end of the corridor, set her backpack down against the wall, and slide down until she was sitting on the cold marble floor with her knees pulled up to her chest. Then Amara started to cry. Not the quiet kind of crying, the other kind, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and held, the kind that a body produces when it has been keeping something compressed for a very long time and can no longer manage the pressure. Her small shoulders shook. Her breath came in uneven pulls. She pressed her face into her knees and she cried the way 7-year-olds cry when they have been trying very hard not to for 14 months. Denise sat down on the floor beside her. Right there on the marble in her building services uniform in the federal courthouse, where she had worked for 11 years without anyone particularly noticing her. She did not say anything. She did not tell Amara to stop, or that everything was okay, or that she had done so well. She just put her arm around her daughter and held on. They sat like that for a while. The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere far below them, the city continued its ordinary day. After a time, Amara lifted her face. "Is Daddy going to be okay, Mama?" Denise looked at her daughter, at the tear tracks on her cheeks and the red around her eyes and the absolute exhaustion of a child who had carried something no child should have to carry. "Yeah, baby," Denise said. "I think he is." Amara nodded, wiped her face with the back of her hand, picked up her backpack. Inside courtroom 4B, things were moving quickly. Craig Whitfield had asked to speak with his own attorney before saying another word, which told the court everything it needed to know about what he intended to say. By noon, he had been joined by a criminal defense lawyer named Patricia Webb, and by 12:47 p.m., with Judge Okafor present and 2 FBI agents seated at the back of the room, Craig Whitfield began to talk. He talked for 47 minutes. Bennett Holloway, founder and CEO of Holloway Electric, the same man who had fired Marcus Jackson in January of the previous year, had approached Whitfield 11 months ago. The arrangement was straightforward. Whitfield would be assigned to Marcus Jackson's case through the public defender rotation as planned. He would do enough to appear competent. He would lose. For this, Holloway would pay him $180,000 delivered in 3 installments through a shell company registered in Delaware. The reason was simpler than anyone might have expected. Marcus Jackson, in his 9 years at Holloway Electric, had become aware of a pattern. Equipment going missing from inventory, not stolen by workers, but redirected, signed out under falsified purchase orders, resold through a network of contractors. The total value just over $2.3 million. Marcus had not reported it. He had not known what to do with what he knew. But Holloway had known that Marcus knew. And when the time came to protect himself, eliminating Marcus was cleaner than bribing him. The footage had been created by Holloway's head of security. The witness, Dale Pruitt, had been paid $40,000 for his statement. The equipment theft would have remained invisible if the plan had held. It had not held. At 4:09 p.m. in the corner office on the 22nd floor of the Holloway Electric building on West Wacker Drive, Bennett Holloway was on his second cup of coffee and a call with his financial advisor when his assistant knocked twice and opened the door without waiting for an answer. 2 FBI agents came in behind her. Holloway stood up slowly. He was 61 years old, silver-haired, the kind of man who wore his confidence the way other people wear their skin, as if it had always been there, as if it could not be removed. He had built a company worth $400 million. He had shaken hands with senators. His name was on a building at Northwestern. He looked at the agents. He looked at the badges. "I'd like to call my attorney," he said. "You'll have that opportunity," the lead agent said. "Bennett Holloway, you are under arrest for obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, conspiracy to commit fraud, and wire fraud." The handcuffs were standard issue. Cold metal. The click they made was not particularly loud, but in the silence of that office, in the space between the mahogany desk and the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River, it was the loudest thing Holloway had heard in years. He was walked through the open floor of the 22nd level. Every head turned. Every person who had worked for this man, who had attended his company retreats and his holiday parties and his quarterly all-hands meetings, watched him pass. He did not look at any of them. He kept his eyes on the floor. Back at the Dirksen Federal Building, Craig Whitfield had one request before he was processed. He asked to speak to the child. The agents consulted with Judge Okafor. She consulted with Denise. Denise looked at Amara and asked with her eyes, and Amara gave a small nod. They brought Whitfield into a conference room on the third floor. He was not yet in handcuffs that would come later, but something about him looked already undone. The expensive suit was the same. The briefcase was still in his hand, though he set it down almost immediately as if he had forgotten why he was carrying it. His eyes were the eyes of a man who had recently understood something about himself that he could not unfeel. Amara sat across the table from him. Denise stood behind her daughter, one hand resting on her shoulder. Whitfield looked at the child for a long moment. Then he did something that no one in the room had anticipated. He moved around the table slowly without urgency, and he got down on one knee in front of her. "I've been a lawyer for 22 years, he said. His voice was rough. "I told myself it was just business. I told myself everybody makes compromises. I told myself a lot of things." He stopped. "But you're 7 years old, and you did what I was supposed to do, what I was sworn to do." Amara looked at him. She was not angry, or if she was, the anger had some other thing in it, something that kept it from being simple. "My daddy lost 14 months, she said quietly. "My mama cried every night. My little brother asked me every week why daddy wasn't coming home." She paused. "That's not just business." Whitfield closed his eyes. Amara reached into the front pocket of her backpack and took out the folded napkin. She looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at him. "My mama always said the truth doesn't need a fancy degree to stand up in court. It just needs someone brave enough to say it out loud." Her voice did not waver. "You had the degree, sir. You just didn't have the brave." The room was completely silent. Whitfield did not stand up for a long time. Marcus Jackson walked out of the Dirksen Federal Building at 5:33 p.m. The sky over Chicago had gone from gray to the particular deep blue that comes in the hour before dark, the kind of blue that makes the city look like it is holding its breath. The temperature had dropped to 34 degrees. Snow was falling again. Not the heavy kind, but the small, almost invisible kind that drifts sideways in the wind and lands on your coat without you noticing until suddenly everything is white. He stopped at the top of the steps. He had not been outside without an escort in 14 months. He stood there for a moment and just breathed the cold air. The exhaust from the street below, the particular smell of a Chicago winter that he had not realized he had missed until he was breathing it again. Then he looked down. Denise and Amara were standing at the bottom of the steps. Denise had her coat open despite the cold, the way she always stood when she was feeling something too large to contain. Amara had her purple backpack on both shoulders and her hands clasped in front of her, and was looking up at him with those eyes, those dark, steady, unreasonably old eyes. Marcus came down the steps. He did not say anything. There was nothing to say that was small enough to fit into words yet. He just reached the bottom and opened his arms, and his wife and his daughter walked into them, and he held on. The three of them stood there on the sidewalk outside the federal courthouse in the falling snow, and the city moved around them, taxis and pedestrians, and the distant sound of the L train, and none of it touched them. After a while, Marcus pressed his face into Amara's braids. "How did you know, baby?" he said. His voice was not entirely steady. "How did you know how to read all of that?" Amara was quiet for a moment. "I just read it, Daddy," she said. "Like you always told me, if something looks wrong, don't look away." Marcus made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a cry, and was both at once. 2 days later, Judge Patricia Okafor asked to meet with Amara privately in her chambers. The room was smaller than Amara had expected, bookshelves on every wall, a desk covered in papers, 2 chairs that did not match a window overlooking Dearborn Street, where the snow had mostly cleared. It smelled like books and coffee, and the particular quiet of a room where serious thinking happened. Judge Okafor was not in her robes. She was wearing a gray sweater and reading glasses, and she looked without the bench and the gavel like someone's grandmother, except for the eyes, which were the same in every context. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Amara sat down, placed her backpack carefully on the floor beside her. "I've been on this bench for 19 years, Judge Okafor said. "I have seen a great many things in federal courtrooms. Things that surprised me, things that impressed me, things that disappointed me." She paused. "I have never seen anything quite like what you did 2 days ago." Amara said nothing. She was not sure what she was supposed to say to that. I want to ask you something, the judge said, and I want you to answer honestly, not the way you think I want you to answer. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. Were you scared? Amara thought about that seriously, the way she thought about things that deserve serious consideration. Yes, ma'am, she said. I was really scared. But you went in anyway. Yes, ma'am. And why did surrender one? Amara looked at her hands for a moment. Because being scared wasn't a good enough reason not to. My daddy was more scared than me. He'd been scared for 14 months. She looked up. I was only scared for about 20 minutes. Judge Okafor looked at her for a long time without speaking. Then she opened the bottom drawer of her desk and took out a book. It was large and heavy with a dark blue cover and gold lettering on the spine, Constitutional Law Principles and Policy. She set it on the desk and pushed it across toward Amara. Read this, she said. All of it. It will take you a while, that's fine. When you're done, read it again. A pause. And then when you're ready, come find me. I will still be here. Amara picked up the book with both hands. It was heavier than it looked. Yes, ma'am, she said. I will. Judge Okafor smiled, a real one, not the professional kind. I know you will. 3 months later, on a Tuesday morning in April, 2 things were announced. The first was the establishment of the Marcus Jackson Wrongful Conviction Fund, $3 million annually donated by a coalition of Illinois law firms and civil rights organizations dedicated to providing legal support to families affected by wrongful conviction across the state of Illinois. The fund's first initiative, a team of volunteer attorneys offering free case reviews for anyone who believed they had been failed by their court-appointed representation. The second was a full scholarship for Amara Jackson through the Chicago chapter of the Innocence Project, a dedicated program combining legal education, civic studies, and STEM for children from under-resourced communities. The program had existed for 3 years. It had never before had an applicant who was 7 years old. It made an exception unanimously. Denise Jackson received a job offer the same week, an administrative coordinator position at the Innocence Project's Chicago office. It paid more than twice what the federal building had paid her. She accepted before the end of the phone call. On an evening in mid-April, when the snow had finally given way and the temperature had climbed back above 50 for the first time since October, Marcus and Amara sat together on the front steps of their building on Southside Chicago. The neighborhood was doing what it always did in spring, coming back to itself slowly, steadily, without fanfare. Kids on bicycles, someone's radio through an open window, the smell of someone cooking something good 2 floors up. Amara had the blue law book in her lap. She was on page 94. Marcus looked over at her. You know what I was thinking about today, he said. What is the one? That morning, when I saw you come through that courtroom door. He shook his head slowly. I didn't even know whether to be terrified or... He stopped. I didn't have a word for it. Were you embarrassed, Amara asked very seriously, that your little girl had to come save you? Marcus looked at his daughter. Something in his face shifted, something that had been heavy for 14 months lifting. No, he said. No, baby. I was the proudest I have ever been of anything in my entire life. Amara considered this. Then she went back to page 94. Above them, the April sky had gone the color of the lake, at dusk deep blue at the top, fading to something lighter near the horizon. The first few stars were beginning to show, small ones, the kind you have to look for, but unmistakably there. And the narrator said quietly what needed to be said. Mama always said the truth doesn't need a fancy degree to stand up in court. It just needs someone brave enough to say it out loud. That day in a federal courtroom in Chicago, on a morning when the temperature was 38 degrees and the snow hadn't finished falling, a 7-year-old girl in a navy dress said it, and the whole world heard her. People looked at Amara Jackson and saw a cleaning lady's kid who had wandered somewhere she didn't belong. They saw a little girl in a navy dress who should have stayed in the break room on the 4th floor and read her book and waited for her mother and not caused any trouble. They did not see a lawyer. They did not see a threat. They did not see someone worth listening to. And that was exactly what Bennett Holloway was counting on. That was exactly what Craig Whitfield had been counting on for 14 months. That the people sitting at the bottom of the building, the ones pushing the carts and cleaning the floors and signing in as visitors instead of badging through, would stay where they were put. Amara Jackson did not stay where she was put. She read the file. She wrote 3 lines on a napkin. She pushed open a door that was too heavy for her, and she told the truth in a room full of people who had every credential imaginable and had done the opposite. I want to ask you something, And I want you to answer it honestly the way Judge Okafor asked Amara to answer honestly. Have you ever known something was wrong and stayed quiet anyway? Not because you didn't care, but because you were afraid no one would listen, because you were afraid of what it would cost you, because you looked at the people on the other side of the room with their suits and their degrees and their easy confidence and thought, who am I to say anything? I think about that question a lot because the truth is, most of the time, the people who change things are not the ones the room was designed for. They are the ones who came in from somewhere else, the ones who weren't supposed to be there, the ones who read the thing nobody thought they would read and asked the question nobody thought to ask and refused to accept that silence was the safer choice. Amara Jackson was 7 years old. She was scared for 20 minutes and she went in anyway. What could you do with 20 minutes of brave? If this story moved you, if it made you feel something or think something or remember something, leave it in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me about a time you said the truth when it was hard. Or tell me what you're still working up the courage to say. I read every single comment, everyone. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Because there are more stories like this one. Stories about people who were overlooked and underestimated and refused quietly or loudly to stay that way. This channel exists for them and for you.